Hi, everybody. Before we get to another great interview, the Too Opinionated podcast could really use your help. And it's easy, it's free. IMDb, which is the entertainment database, imdb.com, named us a top 100 podcast. We came in at number 82. That's a big deal because there's 15 million podcasts and growing. So to be named to anybody's top 100 list, pretty big deal for us. And the way you can help is to go to imdb.com, look up the Too Opinionated podcast, and that's it. Just bringing our page up. That traffic really helps us out. Our YouTube channel is MeisterCon Pod. All we ask is that you subscribe. It's also free, but that really helps us to attract these amazing guests that we keep bringing on the program. And that's it. Two easy ways for you to support us, and we would really appreciate the help. Now let's get to that interview. Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Too Opinionated. I'm so excited today. I get to welcome back author Mark Harris. So welcome, Mark.
Thank you. Happy to be back and give you an update on my story and my books.
Well, you were on a little while back, but not too long ago, and the I told you then the story is horrifying, and it seems like something that you would watch at the movies or on a TV show. It doesn't seem real. So let's kind of start that way, Mark. Give us kind of it's not easy to give a quick version, but as quick as you can version of what the story's about. The book is called Houses of the Holy, A Nightmare Web of Hate, Crime, Corruption, and Child Abuse, which the title itself tells you is not a good story. But give us a little background, just kind of remind us what it is we're talking about.
Well, it started when I married the daughter of a convicted white supremacist neo-federal convict, not knowing of his history and certainly not knowing of his associations or what was literally under his house or under his yard.
Right.
And it was a disastrous marriage because she had severe psychological problems from her own childhood abuse. And anyway, in the end, and trying to protect my kids, the whole situation completely spiraled out of control. A restraining order I filed to protect my sons resulted in the kidnapping of my kids, resulted in the exposure of an arsenal of weapons in the home of this convicted felon. I started looking for answers, and following, paper trails and money trails and corporations and property records and stuff, and uncovered this tangle web of this nightmarish web of people that included a network of people involved in the systematic sexual abuse, human trafficking of foster children. And the big elephant in the room that I've been reluctant in many ways for years and until recently to even talk about, because it's been used to attack me, smear me, discredit me, say I'm crazy and so forth. Ultimately, what I was dealing with was, I call it a right-wing, ultra right-wing Knight Templar cult. The lunatic fringe of Freemasonry and Shriners, and that is who's been targeting my family for years. They are ultimately behind repeated efforts to frame me on false charges, to smear me from coast to coast. And as bizarre as it is, when you look at the data points, there's a big neon sign there. Just going back to the beginning, the foundations of Niceville, Florida, Eglin Air Force Base, where this all occurred. There was mob involvement, but basically it was a bunch of good old boys, and it was a very Masonic town, very racist town, still is. One of the founding family was this Ruckel family. Charles Walter Ruckel II was a big shot on the board executive committee of the John Birch Society. So this house my ex-father-in-law built in 1986 was built on property owned by this John Birch Society Executive Council member. It was
Right.
built by a builder who was a Knight Templar Freemason builder, and it was built under a permit obtained by my ex-father-in-law while he was running around northern Alabama, but with a bunch of neo-Confederate white supremacists plotting against America. So the day of his conviction, and that's my ex-father-in-law, Michael Nobles, the property changes hands between two third parties. Then 4 or 5 years later, he turns around and buys the house that he built. But what gets particularly interesting is, the building of this house occurred simultaneously with entering into corporations. Well, let me rewind. The house built by the Knight Templar leader, the numbering on the street doesn't even make sense. It's numbered 1118 for the year the Knights Templar were founded. Again, the
Well,
same year,
and do I remember
Noble.
right that house was built on another property, right? Somebody owned the property that it was built on.
Yeah, exactly. He didn't even own the property. He took the permit out, and I have the only existing record of that because that and many other records have been deleted from official records. The house was owned by this billionaire, eccentric, racist John Birch Society billionaire, and the property was built by the Knight Templar builder, who ended up buying the house the day Nobles was convicted. He bought the house he was building, and then sold it, which even makes the story more disturbing because it's another pattern, to an active duty military family. Then again, Nobles turns around and buys the house that he built years later. But the same time this house is under construction, the same time he's facing federal prosecution in northern Alabama, and that's being Mike Nobles, Mac's father-in-law, he entered into these corporations with these fellow Church of Christ members, with names like androgynous, alchemy, tabula rasa, panoply, augury, primus, pellucid, luminous, prescience. All these have occult Masonic meaning. The androgen, of course, is Baphomet, that half man, half woman, the androgynous god of Eliphas Levi, wrote about in Albert Pike's Morals and Dogma. Alchemy, of course, is magic. Has multiple forms of spiritual magic or actual physical magic, trying to make things into gold and so forth.
Well, and
Panoply, a
and
knight's
this
helmet.
group of people actually, I mean, they believe this stuff. This is
They
that's
do, based
they're
on
making
what my
they're making sacrifices. They're doing things that obviously they believe in some forms of
right,
it.
right, right. One of the partners is Ty Osmond. He was a big shot at Lipscomb University's Church of Christ. His son, who died in a bizarre accident, and then Ty, the father, died in a bizarre accident later. But Osmond dedicated a memorial to his son at Lipscomb University, which is a fountain. It's a 3-tier pyramid, which the 3 tiers represent body, mind, and spirit, the 3 elements of alchemy. Ty Osmond was the founder of Solomon Builders, named after King Solomon, where the Ark of the Covenant was housed, where they engaged in augury and prescience and these sort of things, divining the future, looking at the intestines of the animals. And of course, there was Baal worship in Solomon's temple eventually, as you may remember from your Sunday school days.
Yep.
And then this whole network of people, including Ty Osmond, Mike Nobles, the Ty Osmond's brother down in Florida, a big shot attorney with multiple ties to presidents through his business partners, including Clinton, Obama, and Trump. They're tied to just a very disturbing number of children's organizations, charities, children's homes, foster children, Christian schools, and some of them appear to be fake and used for money laundering schemes. So then he gets Nobles after his conviction. He makes a deal with the government wearing wire. Apparently, that has given him immunity for any and all crimes since he made a deal with the government and acted as an informant in 1986. uh, he gets propped up as a religious leader in this little all-white racist church in Niceville, Florida, where he becomes the president of Agape Christian Academy. Agape, another term associated with Freemasonry, Knights Templar. It was the name of the Ordo Templi Orientis Sex Magic Lodge of Aleister Crowley's out in California. The symbol, the logo for the school was an alchemy symbol. It was a triangle with circles on each corner saying body, mind, and spirit, the three elements of alchemy. Meanwhile, as I'm trying to deal with this disaster of a marriage, I ended up going through my ex-wife's journals trying to figure out, maybe there's some clue in there. So what, made her so, mentally ill.
Right.
And it was there. There's all these references, crucifixions, burning, rape, locked in cages and preyed on by Satan. She talked about, fantasizing about killing her child and going out and digging another hole as if she'd seen holes dug before to bury children.
Yeah.
So then this Knight Templar builder, this John Birch Society crazy, and the Knight Templar builder's Freemason partner in building developments, they're all on the board of the trustees at the Emerald Coast Child Advocacy Center in Niceville, Florida, which takes care of all the allegations of abuse, which were many of which would fall into the category of ritual abuse.
Right.
All made at least 18 reports. An army of mandatory reporters made these reports. They all made to go away in an elaborate shell game and used the boomerang back on me, try to label me crazy, make false reporting cases against me, and so forth. When psychiatrist, school principal and teacher, therapist, psychologist, medical doctor, all made reports and they got buried. So then there's the black sheep brother that kind of spills the beans on the secrets of the family. His name's Roger Nobles. He has a reading list published online of 100 occult books, 100, including books
Seems like
featuring Aleister Crowley. Yeah, Aleister Crowley, Anton LaVey of the Church of Satan, books about the Kabbalah, a book by Helena Blavatsky. Let's see, I'm trying to remember the name of that. The Secret Doctrine, which, interesting, that particular book has been used by white supremacists and Nazis, even Adolf Hitler, to justify racial purity and white supremacy, because it talks about master races and Aryans and Atlantis and all that nonsense. So, but some of these, a whole lot of these books have pentagrams on the cover, and some of them feature sex magic, which is what my children were victims of. This Nobles character, Michael Nobles, my ex-father-in-law, his brother, the practicing witch, he used to make magic wands and sell them on the internet. Well, my kids disclosed to me, to their therapist, to their medical doctor, to a child protection investigator, that they were raped with magic wands. My son drew a picture of it, and it was just like the ones that the brothers was selling on the internet. So, I mean, I don't know how you make that stuff up. Again, data points. So while I'm looking for answers, I end up in this neighborhood following up a lead on a background check in Walton County, Florida. Niceville's in Okaloosa County, Walton County is next door. It's the partner where Noble's business partner and some of these occult name corporations lived. And I find out about these foster kids. Multiple neighbors tell me about these foster kids who they believe were being sexually exploited. They were said there were frequent friendly visits from local law enforcement, and that the whole family disappeared in the middle of the night and were never seen again. And they left behind computer equipment, camera equipment, child pornography, and so forth. It was all made to go away. Now, I'm afraid those kids were killed. I want to know what happened to those kids that vanished in the middle of the night. But so I followed the paper trail again.
Yeah.
They said it was a Frenchman. Well, it was a Frenchman, a French national named Michel Raphael Barthélemy, another guy named after two archangels. His business partners in this internet corporation included another Church of Christ minister, part of the same network of Church of Christ
Are
ministers
these
as no.
are these like the gentleman that's got the two archangel names? Are
Mhm.
were did they change their name at some point, or were they given that name? Like,
I
was
don't know.
I'm
I
curious
don't
to
know.
see, was like their parents
I am
involved
too.
in this, that where
Right.
they
Well,
kind of
it
set
definitely
them
is.
up for
There's
that?
definitely clues of a multi-generational cult here,
Yeah.
intermarrying. Uh, for example, Noble's business partner, Jerry McCormick, who lived in this neighborhood, and this house now, this particular house is one of the houses of the Holy. It's been sitting there empty for 20 years. And I asked the current owner about it. The guy freaked out, threatened to call the police. He kept saying there's nothing in the house. And there
That
were
sounds
mysterious fires
suspicious.
there. Yeah. And there were mysterious fires there, like somebody was destroying evidence. Two of them were so bad that the fire department was called. But anyhow, so one of the people tied to this human trafficking operation where the kids
Yeah.
disappeared in the middle of the night was a top Pentagon official named Rob Roy McGregor. Again, this is almost cartoonish because this guy is also has an interesting name. He's named after some mythological Irish figure kind of what's the guy who stole from the poor or stole from the rich, a Robin
Oh,
Hood
Robin Hood.
character
Yeah.
in mythology. Yeah. But McGregor's son, McGregor died. I don't remember which year. McGregor's son quoted from Aleister Crowley's The Equinox in his father's obituary. And since I found an article quoting the son of this man in a newspaper article, rambling on about Osiris and Isis, the Tree of Life, Solomon's Temple, and acacia wood, and the Ark of the Covenant.
Right.
Again, more data points, more clues. Now I've tracked this Bartholomew character down. At least last time I'm pretty sure I was able to identify that he's back in Marseille, France now. But and if I found the right Facebook account for this guy, it's pretty disturbing stuff on his Facebook account.
Yeah.
Um, so anyway, so every effort to get protection got blocked. I kept trying to get a restraining order. I kept getting blocked by the same judge. The judge, Thomas Santuri, his wife was a top staffer for Congressman Jeff Miller, who's another Freemason congressman.
Yep.
And we had the same two cops in Niceville, taking one of them who was groomed by this Knight Templar Freemason, Joey Forgione, who kept trying to frame me, was running around destroying evidence, threatening witnesses, falsifying police reports, and so forth. Nobles was finally arrested after I raised hell with the governor's office for the firearms possession, but they took ridiculous, and I got the paper trail, absolutely ridiculous efforts to cover his tracks and fix the case. But interestingly, he was arrested while working as the head of security at a resort that was built by the Knight Templar Freemason that built his house. So the Knight Templar Freemason that built the house was on the board of the directors of the Child Advocacy Center that fixed the cases. He practically raised the cop who was fixing the cases for Nobles. He developed the development where Nobles was working as chief of security, and so
It's
there's
very
that.
scary
So anyway,
that they've got their, obviously it's such a big operation. They've got their hand in like law enforcement, political offices.
yeah,
I mean, that's
I,
kind of terrifying.
I call it
If
I
that were
call it
me, and I know you've been worried about it as well, I'd be fearful of repercussions to call that out.
well, I am. I've suffered them many times, and I've
Yeah.
suffered death threats that ultimately came from Freemasons. Threatened to burn my house down to a guy that was tied to the Freemason sheriff of my own home county.
Wow.
That if I didn't drop a lawsuit in court, that somebody might burn my house down. Um, uh, I was set up with a crooked attorney who made deals behind my back and committed illegal malpractice on me by George W. Bush's former attorney, Ed Fleming, who warned me that I was dealing with a cult and my life was in danger, then dropped me like a hot potato midstream in the case, left me defending myself, which I won that case, by the way.
Well, and that's
Let's
happened to you.
see.
You've had a few different people that have tried to help you that have had things happen where they've backed
Yeah,
off. Whether somebody did it to them or
right,
not, something happened and they backed off.
right. This, I just picked up this. This is it's still in the I guess the background's blurring it out, but it's still in the wrapper that it was returned to me. This was a woman named Nancy Lott. She worked as a cadaver dog trainer, had big time connections in law enforcement that included up to and including Bob Mueller, the former FBI director. I've got a picture of her posing with him. She left my life, returned this package of summary of stuff that I'd gathered up to that point that she had asked for via this female law enforcement officer in this cloak and dagger meeting at a gas station she arranged.
Right.
And there's she has a handwritten note on here: turn over to the feds, FBI, State Attorney General, if Mark Chapman Harris dies. So, and I heard from the guy who set me up with her initially that she was afraid for her safety and her grandchildren's safety. A Hollywood producer was interested in this story, looked over the material, said, it was fascinating stuff. He found it credible, but him and his wife discussed it. They were afraid to do anything with it, afraid for their safety. Let's talk about the murder real quick. The kids testified to witnessing a murder.
This one's
So,
this is
it wasn't
some
just a
newer stuff.
murder.
So, yeah, tell me about that.
Well, it wasn't just a murder. My son ended up testifying, forced to testify against me, and it blew up in their faces. Both of my kids, they witnessed their grandfather commit murder, that he had an arsenal of weapons. They found a pistol in the house and fired it, and it could have been, and so forth. Gabriel, my oldest son, testifies they threatened to crucify him. But they both testified that this man was hung from a tree and burned. Well, my son is autistic. He's gifted. He has a photographic memory. I spent months looking, and we found the site. There were 8 very specific identifying features of that site that all perfectly matched his description. And of course, he positively identified it immediately when we got there. But it was a lynching of sorts, but there was an occult twist to it. The base of the tree was chopped away with an axe, and there were 2 concentric circles dug around the tree, magic circles. Nearby, there was an I-10 overpass, and this is on the Eglin Air Force Reservation, out on the dirt road.
Yeah.
But the overpass nearby had graffiti all over it, occult symbols, upside down black crosses. There was this huge ram's head, a horned ram's head on the side, which is an occult Masonic satanic symbol. And since then, just doing research for my book, I discovered that this site perfectly matches the description of a site in the newspaper that was owned by the Crestview, Florida Masonic Lodge, and used for outdoor rituals that they sold back in the 80s.
Yeah.
They also moved their lodge in 1986, the same year Noble's house was built. I think they moved some of their more controversial stuff out of the old lodge, literally underground in Noble's house, when they closed the old lodge in 1986, and Noble's house was built in 1986. Controversial stuff like a medieval rack, an electric chair, a guillotine. There was another torture device. I'm trying to remember what that was, but
that's awful.
When my son first told me about this, it's like, what the hell? I mean, why would anybody have stuff like this? And through extensive research, I've learned that Freemasons, throughout history, there's you can find some obscure old newspaper articles and stuff. They have had these secret sites where they do these initiation rituals and have these near-death experiences. The guillotine will stop just shy of cutting your head off. It was a human saw. That's what it was. Now they put you on a saw, and the saw stops right before it, slices you in half. But all this is to break you down, to make you a clean slate tabula rasa. That was one of the names of the corporations, and then build you back up as a Mason. There's been people who have been killed in some of the rituals in the past. With one was an accidental shooting, but there's been electric chairs found in these some of these secret Masonic sites and some of this other stuff. But not only that, one of the things I've discovered just recently, my son, drew pictures of all this stuff, but he also drew these occult symbols.
Yeah.
And with the help of Adam Finnick, who works with my publisher, we actually were able to decode one of these symbols, and it's a lesser key of Solomon. It's a symbol for Baal. Now, I love somebody to explain why a 7-year-old child was able to draw a symbol for Baal from memory.
Yeah.
If he didn't see that. And then the nature of the abuse. We've talked about some of the nature of the sexual abuse, but they terrified my son with wearing a mask of the devil. These Halloween toys, but to a 7-year-old, it was nightmarish. A fake skull hanging in his closet. He woke up one night, there was a flying witch flying around the room, but my son was smart enough to know, he described how it operated. It was a battery operated Halloween toy, like you'd buy at Spencer's
What was
or something.
the point of those? What was the point of doing that?
I think, one, to scramble his brain, but I think it was, you remember McMartin Preschool?
Yeah.
One of the way they discredited the children was saying, well, they saw flying witches. Obviously, there's no flying witches, so they must have been making it up. So you scramble a child's brain, and the child says he saw flying witches. But my son was smart enough to know that it was a mechanical device. He described the sound that it made, and so forth. It was a toy, but it still scared the hell out of him.
Sure.
He locked him in some kind of box or closet with a screaming skull with glowing eyes. Well, we saw one of those at the store, a year or so later, and he immediately, he started hyperventilating and stuff, but he identified that's what it was. It was just a Halloween toy. It's a battery operated Halloween toy. So that, my brother, he collects all kind of weird stuff. He's kind of eccentric, and I'm not putting him down. I do the same thing sometimes, I suppose.
Sure.
But one of the things he bought not too long ago was this. It was a coffin with a skeleton inside, with like a glass door on the front, and it came from like the early 20s, I think.
Yeah.
From a local Masonic lodge. From a Masonic lodge in Georgia. So don't tell me these people don't have this kind of stuff.
That's right.
They do. I don't know what their obsession with death is, but so anyway, in the end, I end up after these efforts to frame me fail, I show up to work one day. I'm pulled off of my work schedule, and by the chief pilot, Brad Sheehan, who's now the vice president of flight operations at Delta Airlines and is unfit for that job, forces me to go to the director of human resources, who I found many years later was the son-in-law of a big shot in the Freemasons and Shriners and a police chief from Maine, Richard Small. Brimberry just found out in the last 6 months or so, last August or September, he was arrested. He's been raping and torturing foster kids, using guns to intimidate them, sodomy, children under 10 years old.
Well, it just continues that same pattern.
Yeah, the same pattern. And again, too many data points. There's people involved with the occult and ritual abuse of children, and they're all hiding behind Christianity. That's the other part of the pattern. Brimberry sent his children to a segregation academy, an all-white segregation academy that was founded by a Freemason. His aunt was a lifetime member of the Order of the Eastern Star. So he forces me to go to a substance abuse evaluation with absolutely no basis with this doctor. I got the email over here still, that he refers to as the company doctor and our flight surgeon. the company didn't have a doctor. He was
Right.
lying. He made it up. So he sends me to this guy who, this guy was a former head of the FAA's Accident Investigation Board, Dr. Charles Richard Harper, and a member of the Roswell Masonic Lodge, who performs a medical assassination on him. So Dr. Harper then forces me to go get a psychological evaluation that was completely unnecessary with another racist guy who's been on social media with racist posts. And then right after that psychological evaluation, because we found the tree, I go back to Florida and I get locked in a cage for 6 days, held without bail, labeled crazy. But that's when they forced my kids to testify. The kids testified that everything was true, witnessed the murder. They buried the testimony,
Yeah,
but they
well, I
couldn't
wonder
bury
why
me.
did they force them to testify? Did they not suspect that they might back you up? I mean, that seems like a mistake.
Well, I mean, the prosecutor seemed shocked. I think maybe he had been misled. I don't know, but he was furious. I saw him walk out of the building, red in the face, shaking his head.
Good.
And he comments at the end of the deposition he said, unbelievable, and uh, but anyway, so after all these evaluations, which I passed, this woman in Oklahoma City named Sandy Clymer, who is on the internet claiming she witnessed angels come down from heaven to take her 33-degree Freemason father-in-law to heaven. And she makes these quotes in an obituary of a member of the Rainbow Girls and Order of the Eastern Star. She plants to fake DUI in my records. That's one of the many records that have been tampered with. I have a copy of it, but it's since been removed from my FAA medical records to cover their tracks. There's a heap of records like that have been
Yeah.
hidden, removed, destroyed, shredded. But then one of the most interesting characters in all this is Dr. Charles Berry, who's Michael Berry. I'm sorry, Dr. Michael Berry, whose father Charles Berry chose all the Apollo astronauts, which I learned years later. Were all Freemasons. It's two whose fathers were Freemasons. The NASA administrator was a Freemason. NASA has quite an interesting history in that respect, going all the way
Sure.
back to Jack Parsons of the who founded the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, who was a member of Aleister Crowley's Sex Magic Lodge and had occult rituals with children and all this stuff, and they all turned a blind eye to it because they needed him to design rockets.
Right.
And then he hooked up with what's the guy's name? The Scientology guy, L.
Oh,
Ron
Hubbard.
Hubbard, and
Yeah.
they swapped lives. And yeah, and then Hubbard went off to create his own cult. I mean, we live in a crazy world in a crazy country with so many crazy cults.
Well, yeah, we really
Uh,
do, and we didn't mention last time, and it's I'm assuming it's not connected, but we're dealing with all that Epstein stuff in the news right now, which is
yeah, a
it's
lot of
not great
parallels.
either.
No, there are a lot of parallels, and the Epstein story, like this story, I ended up getting the federal government put a massive squeeze on me. I ended up ganged up in court with Joe Biden's former chief counsel, Stuart F. Delray, the former acting attorney general, Sally Quillian Yates, four other uh, hotshot government attorneys. This Dr. Harper hired 5 law firms, including a fellow member of the Roswell Masonic Lodge. I was targeted by the IRS. I was targeted by Child Protection Services. I was targeted by local law enforcement in my own hometown, and put out of work, blocked from getting unemployment, blocked from getting a loss of license insurance that I paid for. The government put a massive squeeze on me. Some other interesting things. I ended up with 2 important court hearings that were on April 20th, Hitler's birthday. My kids were kidnapped on Halloween. They placed me under false arrest on March 18th, the anniversary of the execution of Jacques de Molay, the last Grand Master of the Knights Templar. They issued me a fake medical certificate labeling me defective, labeling me an alcoholic at the FAA in Washington on October 13th. That was the year, the date the order was given to round up and execute the Knights Templar, which is where Black Friday came from. My first effort to get this story out via ghostwriter this was in 2022. I hired this woman. I'll think of her name here in a minute, but Sarah Miller from Arkansas. Gave her quite a chunk of money as a deposit. Gave her a bunch of background information. Well, in September of 2022, I think it was, I'm sorry, this Shriner Freemason named Charles Rogers from Georgia, who had contacted me, had been pumping me for information, acting like he had all kind of information to help me. He was going to connect me with all the right people and everything. The guy hacked my Facebook account, which is a federal crime.
That's right.
There's not a, I don't think he hacked my Facebook account. I know he hacked my, I was able to confirm, I know he hacked my Facebook account. 3 days later, this ghostwriter sends me an email saying she's been in an accident, suffered a concussion, her brakes went out, her computer was destroyed with all the data on it regarding my book, and I never heard from her again. She kept my money. 2 ghostwriters later, Travis Hierman, and I'm reluctant to say this. I don't want to cause any pain to his family, but I still can't help suspect that he was murdered. He was killed in an accident. Well, he ultimately died from an accident. He was in a coma for a while, but he died from injuries from an accident that occurred on the winter solstice, another important occult day, right after he had interviewed 2 important witnesses and was about to, put what they told him in writing. One of those witnesses has been absolutely terrorized by my ex-father-in-law, the cops who were protecting him, by child protection services, and so forth. 1 or 2 days after Travis's death, that witness who we just interviewed, law enforcement framed her child, autistic child who has a heart condition, and was going to lock him up and keep him in jail over Christmas with no medication. Fortunately, a judge stepped in and released him on bail. But they've been threatening to target her kids if she talked, and they, so many threats made, fall through. Threat to target my job, threat to place me under false arrest, threat to kidnap the kids, threat to arrest Mary Smith's kids, just one threat after another that they actually followed through on.
Right.
So we revised the book.
Just some update stuff. How are your kids doing now? I know before they were suffering from some pretty severe PTSD. We're having some issues. Has that improved any? How are they doing so far?
They're doing amazingly well given the circumstances. My oldest, who his grandfather tried to indoctrinate him and showed him and told him everything, showed him the weapons, talked about blueprints to blow up an IRS building, which is consistent with his past history, and he's the one that the grandfather threatened to crucify and just did some of the sick stuff too. I mean, really to both kids, but more to Gabe. He's permanently disabled. He's been deemed permanently disabled with PTSD by the Social Security Administration, by an army of mental health professionals. He went through several involuntary hospitalizations, thoughts of harming himself and others. He was obsessed with guns and violence for a long time. But he's been working for, I think, 3 years now. Hasn't missed a day's work, high functioning. I'm very proud of him and his brother. His brother's been working hard too. I'm trying to help him buy a house now because he still lives with me and we have to sell our house. But at the same time, I can't, help but think, Gabe is so, he has a photographic memory. He has a lower IQ, he's autistic. He has Asperger's. His photographic memory, extremely artistically talented, and his brother was a math genius in grade school and so forth, and was a perfect straight A student and everything. And he went through a horrible stage as he became a teenager, and drugs, alcohol, suicide attempt, dropping out of school and so forth. I can't help but think of, as proud as I am of them, and I'm not blaming them, what better place they might be had all this not happened. Maybe Gabe could be in art school,
Well, that's right. That's right.
Maybe
It's had to have
maybe
had a detrimental effect on them.
yeah, maybe Toby could be in college, get an engineering degree or something. But they are doing well overall. I'm very proud of them, and they've really turned their lives around from the really rough state that they were in. But in the end, there were 7 plots to frame me. You could trace them all back to Freemasons, basically. 18 falsified child protection reports, resulting from 18 reports that were all made to go away. Falsified FAA records, and then just one agency after another, circling the wagons, lying, deflecting, spinning, denying, stonewalling. And that's continued up until this year. I made a FOIA request, Freedom of Information Act request last year. I didn't get a response till March 18th of this year, which is like 8 months later, but it just happened to be, again, the anniversary of the execution of Dr. Millay, which I couldn't help wonder if they're just trying to taunt me at this point. Just lying, one record after another I requested, they just lied about. Just lied and lied. And I don't know if I'm going to take it any further. I'm eager to file another lawsuit. When I've done it in the past, I got crushed. So I don't know. I don't know.
I mean, is it possible to file somewhere else? Does that make a difference if you file it like in a different place than you filed the last time?
Sure, it does. Yeah. Last time, interestingly, like every case that I ever dealt with, the case was reassigned multiple times. And the last case was before Richard Wayne Story III in Gainesville, Georgia. Now, this is purely circumstantial, but this was a Georgia good old boy who went to University of Georgia, whose middle name is Wayne. That's another funny thing I found. We had Constance Wayne Jones, this Knight Templar builder. His business partner was Wayne Boyett. A cop who falsified a police report to cover up a kidnapping on my kids was Brian Wayne London. The father, the Freemason father-in-law of this woman who planted the fake DUI in my records was Robert Wayne Clymer. Wayne is the name that John Wayne, who was a Freemason, took. Wasn't his original name. The name Wayne means wagon wheel maker or craftsman, and you go to any at least Southern Freemasons, the list that I've looked at, you're going to find a bunch of Waynes. It's a curiosity point, but because they're true believers, they're craftsmen. So and but anyhow, you're right. The judge, who the judge is, I've had the problem of every time I've tried to go to court, the case gets reassigned to the right judge. So.
Right. And I assumed that was probably the case, but I wanted to ask: Are you able to fly?
No, because I won't lie for the government. I mean, my only avenue back to flying would they would probably submit me to more psychological evaluations and substance abuse evaluations and put me in this monitoring program again. It would take years of hassle. And they probably would block it anyway, even if I spent all the time and money to go through all that hassle, because of the labels they put on me. Another recent development, I just recently had an appointment with, I do have PTSD, and that's another issue. I can't take medication for PTSD and fly. Now PTSD itself isn't a disqualifier for flying if you get off the medication.
Right.
So that's an obstacle I couldn't get over. But my recent VA appointment, I was looking over just a routine checkup, physical exam. I looked over the shoulder of the nurse, and on the screen I saw major depressive disorder. Well, once again, I've got a fake diagnosis at a federal agency. I've never been diagnosed with major depressive. I'm not depressed. I do have anxiety. It's part of PTSD.
Well, sure.
I've got physical symptoms from PTSD. I've got high triglycerides and high blood pressure and high cholesterol, all side effects from anxiety from PTSD. But that's a far cry from major depressive disorder. Right. But again, trying to cover their tracks because I have injuries that were ultimately inflicted by the government, And this woman who I told you about, her who was terrorized and her son arrested right after her interview for the book. she had a similar experience with the VA. Her husband was a retiree, and she has VA benefits. She had a diagnosis of borderline personality disorder appear in her VA records, just government retaliation. She'd never been evaluated for borderline
It
personality
is
disorder, and I can assure you,
terrifying that this seems to go up through all of the avenues of government. I mean, that's very
yeah,
scary because I'm not sure. I mean, you need somebody that'll just champion the cause and fight for you. But I don't know how you're going to find somebody because everything's stacked against you.
and that's right. And I, I keep fighting windmills like Don Quixote, and that's the most my primary motive for writing the book is every other outlet have been shut down. The press. I tried to go to the press. I had a reporter in Florida who said there's a hell of a story here, and her publisher shut her down and says we don't report on domestic issues. Domestic issues. I had her, provide them videotape recordings of my kids testifying and witnessing murder. I mean,
Yeah.
and all these records regarding the man's guns and all this stuff. So yeah, everybody who's wanted to help, except for my publisher and a handful of others, have been shut down, retaliated against, and maybe even killed. That's the big question mark I have about the one ghostwriter because the timing was awful and it was very suspicious. I
Very
certainly hope it was
suspicious,
an
I
accident.
think.
Yeah.
Well, Mark, I appreciate you come back and kind of giving us a update. I wish that more positive things would come your way with this. You've
Well,
go ahead.
the bright side is my kids are, you know, I was able to save them from a nightmare. They
Yeah,
suffered mental injuries, but they're in a better place now. Um, you know, they were going to put me in prison
I
and,
know.
and and try to keep me from ever working again and so forth. I'm free. I've rebuilt my career. I can't fly, but I'm working in aviation. I'm making decent income. I'm
Yeah,
remarried. I have a new family. So it's not all. Try not to be the glass half empty.
right.
All the time. You know, of all these battles that I fought, the most important ones I won. They tried to take my kids away.
Yeah,
I won repeatedly. They tried to put me in prison. I won. So yeah,
that's a great way to
it,
look at
it
it.
does upset me, when people say, "Hey, you're going to be able to get your medical back, or can you come out and contract fly for us, or whatever." It eats at me how I lost my aviation
Of
career
course.
to a bunch of flakes, sabotaging my records. But I can't let it. I need to stop letting them occupy space rent free in my head, I guess. So.
Yeah, good luck though. I mean, come on.
Yeah, this is we did it. We did the cover.
Yeah, I liked your new
I
cover.
think yeah,
Yeah, there you
which
go.
kind of reflects more of the guy with the Knight Templar mask is something that gave Drew. Him holding his hand over a child's mouth is just kind of to represent the efforts to silence the kids, to silence
Yeah,
the victims. We have an audio book. I have housesoftheholy.net is a site I've built to kind of add additional information and promote the book. Uh, I'm not about selling books to make money. I haven't made any money off the book yet. I know I'm probably in the red still on it myself. This was all about getting the story out.
that's right.
I really, really want somebody to pick up and run with this. I'm tired of fighting it alone. I'd love to see an investigative reporter, a Netflix documentary, something. I know this is something of public interest. The public would eat this story up if somebody had the courage to put it
Yeah,
out
to put
there
it out
in
there.
a big way. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, Mark, so the book is Houses of the Holy, a nightmare web of hate, crime, corruption, child abuse. Um, and we've talked twice now. I still can't believe any of this is I believe it. I completely believe it, but I can't believe it. It's so crazy. I just you don't think that this type of thing actually happens, but obviously it does.
I dealt with that myself, living through it. I had trouble believing it. And then there's so much data, I knew in my heart my kids were telling the truth, but then so much data came forward, eventually uncovered that it became overwhelming that this is what it is,
Yeah.
and I have to quit looking for some other answer, but it was always right in front of me, and I just didn't want to see it because it was too weird.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's awful. Yeah, it's just horrible. Well, Mark, I hope, we're with you as long
thank you,
as you're
sir.
fighting. I hope that when you get a little further along, you'll come back and update us again. Because I knowing you, I don't think you're going to just give up on it.
No, there's been many times I thought about just going out and burning all my records and so forth and trying to walk away from it. And, then I find out, a couple of weeks ago, there was a report about these kids being raped in this underground bunker in Alabama, and, and it all comes back up and it's like, I'm ready to fight another round, and
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
I'm don't know that I can let it go. So.
Yeah, I know. Well, it's hard to know exactly how you would react if you're put in that situation, but I like to think that I would do exactly what you're doing and fighting as best you can. And I hope that somebody listening or somebody that's heard, read your book or heard your story on a different platform, that they'll take up the cause. Because yeah, you need an investigative reporter, I think.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. Well, okay, Mark, hold on one second. This is it's a very upsetting story. And I think Mark, uh, I mean, he's very courageous. He's got read the book, and you'll understand what I'm talking about. He has had so much stacked against him. And he's just trying to protect his family. He's not trying to get anything out of it other than their safety and preventing any of this happening to someone else. It's just terrible. And there's been a lot of stuff with child trafficking in the news lately with Epstein and some other things. This belongs right there with them. It's all horrible, and we all need to take stock and start pointing this stuff out and really going after anyone that is abusing our younger generation, especially. It's just horrible. Same thing. If you're in government and you're abusing kids or you're doing things that are illegal, then we need to get rid of you. We need to put you in prison, but if we can't do that, we need to get you out of government. And I hope that people are starting to see some of that and acting. The book is called Houses of the Holy, A Nightmare Web of Hate, Crime, Corruption, and Child Abuse. Support Mark. Do yourself a favor so that you're educated about this stuff. Read that book. Thank you guys for tuning in with us again this time. We're really normally most of our interviews are about they're celebrity interviews or musician interviews, and we're learning about that person or a project that they're doing. But we don't ignore the bad stories, and I am not a reporter, but I am happy to pass on injustices, abuse, and definitely anything that negatively affects our young ones. So happy to do that. And if you're interested in this type of thing, we have multiple interviews about all of this horrible stuff, government corruption, the sugar daddy baby situation where people are being trafficked and abused. A lot of that stuff we've got in there, and we've got playlists for them. So I hope you'll check those out as well. Our YouTube channel is MeisterCon Pod. Please subscribe; really helps us out. Our website's meistercon.com. You can find over 1,000 episodes on there, audio and video versions. So please check that out as well. Meistercon.com. Thank you guys so much. Till next time. Bye, everybody.